Welcome to the University of Notre Dame. We're at ND Studios in the Notre Dame Stadium as the Notre Dame Senior Alumni proudly presents the 2024 Kickoff Preview. Hi everyone, I'm Pat Scanlon. We'll get ready for season number 3 of the Marcus Freeman era. Great to be talking football with the head coach, and we'll be doing that over the next hour or so, but lots of good things to talk about. Of course, the 7th-ranked Irish are talented, they're deep, and it all begins for them on August 31st at Texas A&M. Now, coming up on the show, we'll hear from the head coach, Marcus Freeman. We'll also be joined by Eric Hansen. Eric Hansen of Irish ND Insider, and he's also the publisher and a Notre Dame insider. And we'll be joined by Jamie Uyeyama, who works for Irish Daily Sports, or Irish Sports Daily. Those two guys will be sharing their thoughts with us. And of course, I'm very pleased to be joined by a gentleman who now qualifies as a senior alum, and has been joining me for the last 4 years now, Mike Golic, standout Notre Dame and NFL player. And Mike, great to have you back here again talking Irish football.
Oh, it's great to be talking Irish football in a campus in an area I've been spending a few months of under construction, and hopefully all this construction will be done by the first home game September 7th against Northern Illinois. But there's a lot of work going on around campus, and I'm sure a lot of work going on in the football field with Marcus Freeman's team.
Mike, I'm glad you could take some time out of your busy schedule. You're back on the radio with Mike Jr. Great to hear you guys. And, of course, you hosted the Golic Subpar Golf Tournament, a charity event that benefits a lot of South Bend charities as well. So you've been pretty busy. Yeah, trying to keep busy, trying to keep moving. Even, I'm a senior alumni now, so I have to stay active and keep going so I don't fall into any kind of trap of just laying around. Well, I'll tell you what, nothing to lie around this college football season. For the first time ever, a 12-team college football playoff, and if things go well for the Irish, it could mean a playoff game here at Notre Dame Stadium on December the 20th.
Yeah, that is obviously something new, something I think the Irish should be looking forward to. Again, they can't have one of the top 4 seeds that goes to a conference champ. Top 4 conference champ get the byes, but they should be in position to get the home game. And December 20th, South Bend, Indiana. Who knows what the weather's going to be like and what they'd be playing with. But let's not get the cart too much before the horse.
You want that warm weather team to come into
that's true.
December 20th. Absolutely. A lot of new things around campus as well. A new athletic director, Pete Bavacqua. And the Shields Family Hall is under construction. That's going to be the $100 million home of the Fighting Irish football team.
I don't get jealous of college players now that can get NIL money. I think it's great. I don't get jealous of NFL players who are making way more money than I ever made playing in the league. But I do get jealous of facilities that you're working out with, that you go in every single day. It's like you're home away from home. And this is just going to be state of the art. But they do have an alumni locker room in there. So a place for us to go.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, a lot to talk about this in the next half hour, 45 minutes. But first off, let's start out with the head coach. Recently, I had a chance to sit down with head coach Marcus Freeman. You're number 3 of the Marcus Freeman era, Coach. Do you ever reflect now, today, where you are today versus where it all started a year ago and the mad scramble to get ready?
I don't know if you reflect on that. You reflect on your process. You reflect on, hey, what are the things that you learn from the previous seasons and what you believe it takes to have success. And I think that's what any leader will do, is how do we enhance our process, enhance our routines to produce a better desired result.
Offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock comes back to Notre Dame, joins you. Offensively, what does he bring to the scheme that you're looking for?
Well, I think, the leadership he brings is unbelievable, but the creativity, the ability to put his players in position to have success is something that he's always done in those years that I've known Mike Denbrock, and it's no different now being back at Notre Dame.
With Riley Leonard at quarterback right now, a quarterback who can hurt you with his arm and his legs, and leading a very deep quarterback room, what does he bring to the attack?
Well, I think number one, he's an ultimate competitor, Riley Leonard is one of the most competitive individuals I've been around. And that's what any great football player, a great athlete has, is competitive spirit. And he has that. But he's a great teammate and a great leader. And those, to me, are traits that really will produce a lot of success.
Coach, you hear a lot about depth, about strength training in the off season. A lot of depth on this team, some great, the running back room, receivers, tight ends, et cetera. What about offensive line? I know you lost your left tackle recently.
Well, that's why you have depth, and that's why you create depth. And we have a lot of great players here, and there's a lot of confidence in Tosh stepping up, and whoever will be on that field when we play Texas A&M. There's a lot of confidence in the depth of that room. Coach Rudolph has done a great job recruiting, but also developing that room. And so injuries are a part of the game. Injuries are a part of practice. They're a part of playing the game of football, but you have to make sure you have that depth that can step up and perform.
You're number 3 also for your defensive coordinator, Al Golden. Defense made some great strides in year 2 under him. Now year 3 with a lot of great players back, led by Howard Cross and Riley Mills and Morrison and Watts, all those, and let's not leave out Jack Kaiser. A lot of depth on defense as well. What do you expect from, as a former defensive coordinator, your defense this year?
Well, I think the defense will be a reflection of the head coach and the coordinator. When you're talking about year 3, you're doing things that you couldn't even think about doing year 1. And they're going to be at another level in terms of the details, in terms of the fundamentals. Like they're at another level. And so I'm excited for what that group's going to be able to do in the future. But they're having a great training camp. And I'll tell you what, man, Coach Golden and that defensive staff have done an unbelievable job preparing that group.
And it's a unique year because so much is changing in college football. College football playoff expanding to 12 teams now. So a lot of extra interest in the way this season's going to go this year.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's great for college football. 12 teams will have a chance to compete for the national championship in the playoffs. And, I think you have to have a great plan for that transition period of week 12 to the first week of the playoffs. You have to make sure the depth of your team is ready to perform at any given moment. But the approach is the same. You go into the season planning to win every game you play and preparing to win every game you play. If you do that, you'll be in the playoffs. The rest of it will take care of itself.
Coach, what about your special teams? You've got a new place kicker, and you've got a punter who could probably be a weapon in flipping that field in Rendell.
Yeah, Coach Biaggi, our special teams coordinator, does a great job of bringing in Mitch Jeter, transfer from South Carolina, has a huge leg, has done really well in training camp. And then James he's a weapon. He's got a strong leg, man. He's a very mature individual, not only by age, but he's a mature person, period. And he's done some great things in his short time being here.
Coach, if I could speak for the Alumni Association, I know that you really embrace the Notre Dame tradition that they love. They love the fact that you're all over the country meeting with Notre Dame clubs and alumni clubs, et cetera. And you're also a great family role model for the players and Notre Dame. How important is that to you?
Well, I think, one, I love this university and what it does for our young people. And if that means that being a part of this place, I get a chance to go spend time with those that make it possible. I want to do that because of, the opportunity our people have when they're done and graduate from this place is special. But, being an example for our players as a father and a husband is so important for me too. And it's critical time for their futures. And the greatest example I can be sometimes is the things I display, not always what you say, but what they see. And I think it's really important.
Coach, no pressure. Coaches in their 3rd year at Notre Dame, 4 of them happen to win a national championship.
Oh, yeah. Hey, listen, I don't care if this was year 1, 2, or 3. Every year is a plan to try to win the national championship, and it's no different this year. But it's exciting to know that that's what the history has shown. We're going to try to keep that thing going.
On behalf of the senior alumni, thank you for your participation again, Marcus.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys and your support.
Mike, Leahy, Parsegian, Devine, and Holtz all won national championships in their 3rd year.
Yeah, and Brian Kelly played for a national championship in his 3rd year. I think Coach knows that. But as he also said, and he's correct about, every year you're going for the national championship at Notre Dame. Being an independent, there's no conference title to worry about. It's basically all or nothing every year. So I think he understands that.
he had a lot on the changes, the depth, the talent. I mean, Mike Denbrock, Riley Leonard. So many new faces and new pieces to the puzzle. And of course, Al Golden and that defense seems to be just a force to reckon with.
Yeah, the defense played awesome last year, and you mentioned in that interview some of the holdovers from there, from Cross to Mills to Kaiser to Morrison to Watts. But we're in a landscape now of college football where you have to incorporate new players every year. And Notre Dame now for 2 years in a row has done it at the most important position, the quarterback position, with Sam Hartman, now with Riley Leonard. You throw in there Bo Collins. You throw in there your punter and Rendell, your kicker and Jeter. I mean, really important positions where you have new people being involved. But this is the landscape of college football now. You have to adapt. You have to bring in players to fill holes and add depth. This, you mentioned it as well, this quarterback room depth, this is almost unheard of in the college level. And you eventually may lose guys, and it's through no fault of the coaching staff. It's just the fault of there's only one quarterback on the field at a time and one ball to play with, and quarterbacks want to play. So at some point, do you lose some of these guys, or can you build and progress with a quarterback, which in the last 2 years they didn't. They just brought in someone else, but now you have young Angeli's a little older, between Mincy and Carr, young quarterbacks to develop and progress over the years.
And off that spring game performance, who'd have thunk that C.J. Carr would be one of the four and maybe the fourth quarterback as far as experience goes?
Yeah, I mean, he's come in, and I had a chance to sit down and talk with him at a little luncheon, just for a small group of people, and really a heady kid, really very, very talkative, very secure in himself, very sure of himself, kind of taken over. There was a few other freshmen there, kind of the leader, kind of the spokesman, doing exactly what a quarterback should be doing, and loving Notre Dame, which is wild with his granddad having the Michigan connection.
Lloyd Carr, the former coach, yes, at the Michigan Wolverines. Hey, let's take a look at the schedule. It all begins for the Irish at Texas A&M. It's a night game, fortunately, because we think it'll be a little warm down in College Station, Mike. And then, out of that Texas A&M game, then a little Indiana home cooking, because they don't leave the state for the next 4 games.
Yeah, listen, the schedule is favorable this year. Let's make no bones about it. It is favorable. You obviously have Texas A&M on there, the Louisville game, the revenge game. Hopefully we'll get there. Florida State, Southern Cal. But there's a lot of winnable games, and that's what you need to do if you're going to vie for the national championship. You need to take care of business against the teams you should take care of business of. And Notre Dame has a lot of those on the schedule that they should be able to take care of business of. And that's what they need to do to kind of set in stone each week the progression they're going to make.
In the Associated Press Top 25 that recently came out, Texas A&M ranked 20th in the country. It won't be an easy game for sure. The Irish ranked number 7 at this point.
Yeah, Casey Wigman, their quarterback, certainly has some experience for them at their place at Kyle Field. Could be a little warm, but it's going to be warm for both teams. It's not like Notre Dame's not practicing in heat right now.
Mike Elko.
Mike
New
Elko.
Head coach at Texas A&M.
I mean, talk about knowing Notre Dame, but also knowing the quarterback at Notre Dame, and Riley Leonard being the former coach at Duke. So, and again, no preseason games. So it's almost like it's obviously who executes the best, but also who makes the fewest amount of mistakes. Turnovers can be so costly in every game, but early on, flipping the field. Rendell, we talk about the punter, how we can flip the field and put your defense in a good position. So these are the little things that add up in early games of the season, because you don't have preseason games to really get as prepared as you'd like.
James Rendell, 6'6", former Australian football kicker, an amazing talent from what we hear. And Mitch Jeter is a 50 of 53 for field goals as he comes to Notre Dame from South Carolina. Yeah,
I mean, so 2 very, very important players. Again, coming in off the transfer portal. Well, Rendell out of pro kick out of Australia. That kid, I mean, you got to. you got to tell him not to go down and make any tackles. I mean, 6'6", 2.25", dude looks like a linebacker. And, playing, rugby, obviously, Australian news football is used to hitting some people. But two possibly great weapons for Notre Dame. It's like, you don't want to go get your drink when special teams is coming on when we're punting or kicking a field goal.
It's going to be very interesting. Well, speaking of interesting, we'd like to bring in Eric Hansen of Inside Notre Dame Sports. Eric, the publisher, and has followed Notre Dame football for a year or two, as I recall. And Eric, it's great to have you on the show again. And how about your insights on the way fall camp is going at this point?
Well, I think it's going as expected. As you mentioned, the defense looks like something that could build on a top 5 finish last year. They were 5th in the country in total defense, and that's the first time Notre Dame's been ranked that high in total defense since 1980. And the questions and the curiosities more on the offensive side of the ball, particularly with the offensive line, with the possibility of maybe having 5 starters, none of whom have a complete season under their belt. If it goes that way, there's still a position battle going there, a lot of new faces in the wide receiver core. But it's still a team when you look at it, and I vote in the AP poll, I voted Notre Dame number 6, that you can see the potential. If they can get through some growing pains early, I think this will turn into a team that's hosting a playoff game in December.
Well, let's stay on that offensive line for a minute. With Charles Jagusa, they're replacing one of the tackles. We have a first rounder and a second rounder, an alt, and Blake who go in the draft. So you're replacing 2 tackles, and then the best one gets hurt. So Coach Freeman in the interview with Pat talked about depth. There doesn't seem to be a lot of experienced depth at the O-line position.
Yeah, I mean, if you went into the season and said, what's the position group that could least likely afford an injury, tackle would have been at the top or near the top of that list. Now it's definitely at the top. You have 2 first-time starters in terms of a season, and Emil Wagner has never started a game. Tosh Baker has had a few spot starts here and there in his career as a 5th-year guy. And then behind those 2, you have 2 true freshmen. Now, a lot of talent, a lot of pedigree, but not a lot of experience. And you are going against one of the best defensive lines in the country in that very first game. So, yeah, Notre Dame may eventually get it right, but it's going to be important in that first matchup that this offensive line have some continuity, some cohesion, so that they can compete against that really good Texas A&M front.
Eric, Mike Denbrock back as offensive coordinator. He's got 6 tight ends that can all play as we speak right now. He's got a full running back room, and the receivers, a little thin last year, are full and ready to go. So. Can he maybe flex a little bit? Maybe 3 tight ends or 4 wideouts. What do you think offensively from Mike Denbrock as he tries to deal with that inexperienced offensive line?
Yeah, so Mike's coming in having coached the number 1 scoring offense, the number 1 team in total offense last year at LSU. You kind of look at maybe where he's different from the last time he was calling plays for Notre Dame in 2015 and 2016. And you brought up a good point about flexing different things. I think at times we're going to see 3 tight ends. At times we're going to see 4 wide receivers. Times we're going to see 2 running backs. And that's what Mike Denbrock wants to do. He wants to be really good at a lot of different areas so he can exploit weaknesses, where he can get really favorable matchups with his offense. That's what he was able to do at LSU, and that's what he liked to do with this Notre Dame offense. Plus, he has that quarterback with a dual threat, which Mike really likes. He had Jaden Daniels at LSU, and people say, well, Heisman Trophy winner. But I'll tell you, the 2 years before he won the Heisman Trophy, his stats were very average at Arizona State, and Mike Denbrock's offense really brought the best out in him.
Yeah, it's different personnel, kind of same thing for Notre Dame, running attack, built with tight ends, and now a quarterback who can run. Jeremiah Love leading the running back room, another deep running back room. So as we talked about, a lot of different formations you could roll. But talk about Love and that running back room.
I mean, if we take Riley Leonard out of the conversation, let's do that. I think Jeremiah Love is the best offensive player on this team. You know, he was in the high 180s when he played in the Sun Bowl last year and had a little bit of trouble between the tackles. He's 210 now with all that speed. He worked at wide receiver some in the spring, so he's added some skill set to his game. I think he's going to be really explosive because now he's big enough to break those tackles that he wasn't breaking in the Sun Bowl. And I think we're going to see more home runs from Jeremiah Love. I also think he can get the tough yards. There's a lot of depth behind him, but I think it starts with Jeremiah Love.
What about the receiver position? Do we have that elite speed this year that maybe we lacked last year?
I think Notre Dame did a good job of adding some of it with their newcomers. I mean, we saw Jordan Faison as a walk-on who was on the lacrosse team, who became an important part of this team by the end of the season, was the Sun Bowl MVP. But Notre Dame also brought in some freshmen, 3 freshmen. They also brought in 3 graduate transfers. And one of them, Chris Mitchell, had a big year at Florida Atlantic last year. And I think he's kind of the wild card here. You know, Mike Denbrock likes that outside receiver to be able to take the top off a defense. It kind of opens everything else up. And he's hoping Chris Mitchell turns into that kind of Will Fuller, Kevin Stefferson type of receiver. We have not seen the consistency of that yet in practice to this point. We have seen the speed, and I think eventually he will become that player as we go into the season. And I think that's a guy to really kind of keep your eye on. But there are a lot of good receivers. Bo Collins from Clemson, I think, is going to be one of Notre Dame's leading receivers. Jaden Greathouse is greatly improved, sophomore in the slot. Lots of good depth at wide receiver, but keep your eye on Chris Mitchell.
Let's look at Al Golden's defense. You have some veteran leadership on all levels with Cross and Mills on the line, Kaiser, linebacker, Watson, Morrison, and the secondary. Where is the most work needed on this defense?
That's a trick question because when you watch you're like, I ask myself that question. I think it's more splitting hairs on things, you know, building depth at cornerback. You have 3 really good ones at the top of that depth chart. There's a couple of freshmen and a seldom used senior behind them at cornerback. Safety is really coming. The young linebackers are really good. Maybe you could say defining who your pass rushers are on the edge, but Jordan Botello's having a really good camp. Boubacar Traore is a young guy to keep your eye on, as is Bryant Young's son. I would say more in the finer details with them, and everybody's staying healthy at this point. But right now, the defense looks like they're ready to go for Texas A&M.
Boubacar Traore is on my all-name team this fall. Great name, great player. As he's pushing a lot of veteran players as well, so that's good to hear. The secondary, unbelievable, the depth there, Eric. You know, you speak about Morrison, you speak about Xavier Watts and all that. How do you feel about the secondary?
Well, they had the #1 pass efficiency defense in the country last year. That's the first time Notre Dame's ever won that statistical category national championship. You don't get a trophy for it, but it's nice to have in recruiting when you're trying to get more cornerbacks and safeties. And there's a lot of those key pieces back. You have Ben Morrison, who we believe is going to be 100% healthy from his shoulder surgery for the opener. You have guys like Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey at cornerback. You have Xavier Watts, a unanimous All-American, coming back at safety. Notre Dame brought 2 really good grad transfers in from Northwestern, Rod Hurd II, who's playing safety, and then you have Jordan Clark at the nickel. But the surprise was some of the young safeties that had such a good spring and have continued into the fall. I'd keep my eye on Adon Schuler, a sophomore, and Luke Talich, another sophomore, to really be part of a strong safety rotation. So I think the defensive backs for Notre Dame are going to be really strong.
Adon Schuler out of Irvington, New Jersey, and has really made his presence felt already as a sophomore. Eric, stick around for a moment. I'm going to bring in Jamie Uyeyama of Irish Sports Daily, and we're talking about all these young players, and that's one of Jamie's areas of specialty. Jamie, you follow recruiting very closely for Irish Sports Daily. What about all these young players really making their presence felt this year?
Yeah, there's the class was it was a good class that Notre Dame signed, but I think once you get a look at them, obviously there's several of them were early enrollees in the spring. There's a bunch of guys that came in again in the summer too. I would say guys who really impressed and showed that they were more physically prepared than a lot of freshmen typically are. Some really just like exciting guys. I think the guy everyone has been talking about since the spring, one of the highest rated guys in the class in terms of rankings is Kingston Viliamuasa, the linebacker, but he's also a pass rusher. Eric mentioned talking about looking for some of that edge rush, that they're going to lose with a guy like Maris Liufau going on to the NFL. Well, KVA is a kid who has that potential to kind of fill that role, even as a freshman. And, they rave about his, maturity. Certainly he's a guy who's physically mature. He's already 230 pounds and looks like he's been in the program for a couple of years, but just his mental maturity, his knowledge of the defense, his ability to just adapt and just really want to learn and get better. And, going into the linebacker room, that's really talented. Obviously, they have the veteran Jack Kaiser there. You have Drake Bowen, you have Jaden Osbury, who's another guy who's redshirted last year, who's a year in the system at least, and Jalen Sneed, who's really, really taken off and is, I think, ready to break out this year. So for KVA to kind of get in the mix there, I think it says everything about the kind of talent that he has. Eric mentioned those corners, they're probably going to rely on those freshman corners, not to really play big roles, but to at least provide the depth. I think Leonard Moore, who's more of an outside corner, Carson Hobbs, who's been working at the nickel, both those guys have looked good. When we got a chance to watch them this fall, they came in both in June, and really, I would say both physically ready to go, like 185 to 190 pounds. So not guys that needed a ton of time in the weight room when they got in, and probably more athletic than a lot of people thought. And both those guys, everything I've heard about them too, is that they are very, very sharp. They don't look lost out there, which is something that can easily happen when you're, jumping into an Al Golden defense, playing an NFL scheme. Getting a lot of help, obviously, from the veterans that are there to kind of mentor them along. But both those guys kind of show that, if they're needed in a pinch, where, you think of the Pitt game last year where, Notre Dame was without Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart. And you think of how Christian Gray had to step up and play in that game as a true freshman, and he did not look out of place. In fact, he probably had one of the best plays of the year with that diving interception. These guys would be able to help if they're needed. I think up front, it's always tough for some of the defensive linemen to play because Notre Dame is really, really so deep there. But I would say guys to look out for, not who's from this class, but who's from the previous class who redshirted last year. Armel Mukam is a defensive tackle who came on really at the beginning of this camp. Gabriel Rubio hurt his foot on the very first day of camp, which was unfortunate, but that offered an opportunity for Mukam, who missed the spring because he was recovering from a shoulder injury. He's a guy that physically is really, really impressive, and you could just see him coming on. He hasn't played a ton of football in his life. He only played a couple years of high school football. He's originally from Canada. Was more of a hockey player. He came in at about 250 pounds. He's closer to 300 now. Really just made a huge jump physically, and is a guy that, has a chance to push for the rotation, as well as, Bryant Young's son, Bryce, obviously another guy who was highly rated, but really kind of took off as the process went along. And even you can see the big difference between him from the spring to now in just his physical development. He's just long. He looks like a guy, not too many freshmen that come in, defensive linemen have his kind of length, his kind of twitchiness that you see at Notre Dame. You know, he's in that kind of Isaiah Foskey type of mold where there's just not too many guys built like that who can come in and look like that, even if he might need, a little bit of time before he gets going.
But Mike likes to keep an eye, Jamie, on those defensive linemen now. That's his specialty, and he's got his whole scouting report on the defensive line and Howard Cross the third and the rest of the company.
Yeah, you mentioned all the youngsters that could play on defense. How about any youngsters on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, I mean, we were talking about the left tackle situation, and Marcus Freeman mentioned when you spoke with him, Pat, that Tosh Baker was he's technically the veteran guy who's started a handful of games in his career, and he's a fifth-year senior, so he's the oldest guy, the most experienced, but he's getting pushed by a guy, true freshman, Anthony Knapp, who I would say is probably one of the more biggest surprises of the spring. Really showed out in the blue gold game with the way he kind of handled himself against Traore and RJ Oben, the Duke transfer. Didn't look out of place at all. Reminds me a lot of Robert Hainsey in that way, where maybe he's not the biggest guy. He's over 290 pounds right now. Which is a good size for a freshman, but he's not Joe Alt. He's not Blake Fisher. He doesn't have that same kind of frame, but he's just a darn good football player. And he might be someone that is better suited to play guard or center later on in his career. But maybe like Hainsey, who's, split time at starting as a tackle, as a true freshman, Knapp could be the answer there. That is a distinct possibility. And Gerby Lambert, who came in the summer, I think physically easily one of the most impressive players that they signed in the entire class. He is an absolutely massive human being. It's always tough coming into the summer and being ready to play, but they probably have to accelerate his development to at least get him in the mix to try to kind of push to get in the two deep. So I wouldn't look for him to be someone who played early on, but he could be someone who pushes later on if they're not finding what they need at the tackle position. But it's really the skill guys that I think, have the best chance at really making a difference this year. It'll be tough at the boundary because, you have Jade Thomas returning. You have, Bo Collins, who Eric mentioned as the Clemson transfer, who are there. But Micah Gilbert, all he did was impress everyone from the first day of spring all the way up through the blue gold game, continued to make plays when we've seen him in fall camp too. Really, really impressive ball skills, probably faster than a lot of people think he is. He's the receiver who has I would say the best chance at playing early, who looks the most physically ready. And then I think with Jabron Payne, who was the third down back for Notre Dame last year, unfortunately, he tore his ACL in the blue gold game, but that opened up an opportunity for some of these young backs. And I think that really opened the door for a guy like Aeneas Williams, who Dylan McCullough spoke about as a guy who probably would have been Jabron Payne's understudy this year. But he's someone that might have to play this year, and he's really, really taken it to heart. He's very physical runner for not the biggest guy, has a lot of skill set that's very similar to a Kyron Williams. You always don't want to compare too many guys to the guys that are stars at Notre Dame. It's a lot to put expectations on that, but he really has a very, very similar game to him, and he could be that type of player. And then Kedron Young is more of the Audric Estime type, not quite as big as Audric was at the end there, but when you see him in person too, he's another one of these guys who's, about 220 pounds, looks put together like he's been in a college program for a while. And if they're looking for short yardage help, he could be the guy for them.
Mike, when you go down to Texas A&M on opening night, though, you're probably not going to see an awful lot of that young talent that Jamie's talking about, because they're going to be battle tested. That's a tough place to play. You're going to have heat. You're going to have a very good team, and you've got a coach that really knows your quarterback.
Yeah, it'll be tough to have young guys play. Though, if it's hot and you need some depth, you need to spell a few plays, you may have to look for a situation where, depending on the depth at the position, of having to play a guy for a series or two just to give somebody a break, depending on the heat.
And Jamie, talk a little bit about this. The linebacker core, talking about a 5-man rotation. The coach said we're not going ones and twos. It's a 5-man rotation at the linebacker spot, which is pretty impressive.
And I think it's legitimate. I don't think they're doing it because sometimes they're trying to play that many guys because you don't have the answers. I really think it's because they have too many good answers. And that just kind of shows. I think one of the things that a guy like JD Bertrand did such a great job of is being a mentor to a lot of the younger guys on the roster. And I think Osbury, Bowen, Snead, all of them mentioned the kind of impact that Bertrand had on them in terms of just how he handled his business every day, his work ethic, the time that he spent in the film room, everything he did to prepare. And I think having that, and then also having Jack Kaiser and obviously Maris Liufau as well, were great examples for those guys. And every single one of those guys too were very, very highly rated for a reason. They're great athletes, really, really impressive athletes. And I would say that you're probably looking at, even though, you're losing something when you don't have 2 fifth-year starters like a Bertrand, like a Liufau, but you're gaining some pretty special athletes in what they have there with Bowen and Osbury and KVA, who I mentioned before, kind of stepping into other roles. And I really think Snead is absolutely an X factor for Notre Dame this year. Obviously, he played last year. He was a third down sub package guy for Notre Dame. I think he's still going to be a sub package guy for Notre Dame this year, but he really, really has taken a jump. And, linebackers coach Max Bulla has mentioned, several times he's the guy that he's most impressed with in terms of the leap that he made from last year to this one.
Excellent. Let's go back to the schedule and bring in Eric Hansen again, and we'll talk a little bit about the way things are lining up. Eric, of course, we mentioned Texas A&M and then the 4 Indiana games for the Irish in September. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts, the way the schedule plays out.
I like the rhythm of this schedule. I think Texas A&M gives you a game that really tests you early, that you're going to find out some of your weaknesses that you didn't find out from camp, be able to fix them, and hopefully do that with a victory under your belt and not a loss. And then I think, Louisville's going to be a challenge. I think Georgia Tech's a potential trap game just because their offense is so good. They need to learn how to play defense, but their offense is really good. And then you get into that November schedule, and that's when Notre Dame should be at its best. That's when we shouldn't have questions about the offensive line if there have been no injuries. And you have the big ones with Florida State on the 9th and then November 30th at Southern Cal. And if Notre Dame is undefeated going into November, I do think they have wiggle room to lose one of those November games and still make the playoff. I don't think that they can lose 2 in November and still make the playoff this year. There are years 10-2 will get you in. I don't think it will this year, given this rhythm of this schedule, if you have 2 losses in November.
Eric, you've just heard a lot of discussion about the younger players, et cetera, talking to Mike about that defense. What are your feelings about the overall depth of this football team and the expertise on the defensive side?
Yeah, I agree with Jamie. I think the defensive coaches have done a great job of blending in some younger players with the older players, especially at the linebacker position. You look at that 5-man rotation, and one of them's a freshman and 2 of them are sophomores. And then one of them's Jalen Snead, and then you have Jack Kaiser, who's as old as Jamie and me. But I'm sorry, Jamie, I put you in my same age group. But he's maybe in Jamie's age group. But and you look again, the young corners, the young safeties. There's a lot of places where those young players can help. And as Mike Golic suggested, I mean, it's probably going to be very humid, very hot. I know defensive line coach Al Washington has said, I want to play 11 or 12 guys, and that's not just in the Texas A&M game. So again, you're going to see a lot of rotation on the defense, and some of them are going to be young players. I asked Max Bull, the linebackers coach, said a lot of people are concerned about youth on your linebacker core. He goes, well, I'm not. And he had a few salty words to add in there. So I think he's pretty confident in that group.
Yeah, Eric, at the end of the day, offensively, aren't we probably looking at another run-heavy offense, given the fact that the quarterback can run as well and look to run to set up the pass?
I think so. I mean, Mike Denbrock wants to be able to do that and wants to be unpredictable and do that well. But I think he would like Riley Leonard to progress as a passer. I think he would like and feels like Riley Leonard has that in his back pocket, that he can turn into this guy that can get the vertical passing game going when they need to. Again, you don't want to be in a position against Texas A&M where it's 3rd and 8 all the time. So you want to mix it up a little bit and be able to throw those passes. But yes, Notre Dame is not going to get away from its identity from being a team that wants to run the ball when it needs to and when it has to and when it wants to.
Let's give Jamie Uyeyama a crack at the schedule. Jamie, what do you think of the way things line up for the Irish, looking at that schedule that begins that August 31st date is looming quickly?
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I think the way that it sets up, this is probably the friendliest schedule that Notre Dame has had probably since 2021. I would say, where they really only had that one really big game that year at Cincinnati. And if you look at kind of where everyone else set up, it was, there's a reason. I don't know if that team was the most talented 11-win team. But I do think this team actually is more talented and can be an 11, 12-win team in the regular season. And they have the schedule that sets up well for it, right? They only have 3 true road games. And I think that's the thing that really stands out. And really 2 of those are in the first 3 weeks of the season, right? With at Texas A&M and at Purdue. Then they don't play another true road game until they go to, the Coliseum in Los Angeles. So I think it just really sets up well for them. I think even if you're looking at USC this year, which it's always tough when they go, no matter where USC is, no matter what's going on with their program, that's always going to be a tough game for Notre Dame, to close out the season. But USC has a brutal schedule this year, a very, very tough schedule. There could be a lot of heat on Lincoln Riley at the end of the season when they get to that game. I think so much depends with the season and how things are going. If Notre Dame can survive the Texas A&M game to begin the season, they come out of there with a win. I think they're looking very strong to, have a good chance at running the table all the way till they get to that Florida State game. And even then, that's not a game where they have to go on the road to Tallahassee. They have to come up. It's going to be November. It's going to be cold. Those Florida kids are going to come up and, have a tougher time there. They traditionally have. So they don't play too many games up north at that time of year. So it really sets up well for Notre Dame. I would say the only thing that would give me pause with the schedule, just in terms of the difficulty of it, is they're playing 3 teams in A&M, in Louisville, and FSU that have really, really talented edge rushers. And obviously, offensive tackle is the biggest question for Notre Dame on offense this year. And that's going to be a question. So when we're talking about whether or not Notre Dame's going to be a running team, or a passing team, and I think running the ball and not having those guys get after the quarterback as much as possible is probably going to be something that Mike Denbrock does quite a bit in those matchups.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Run at the edge rushers. I think we're all kind of being nice about it, saying it's a favorable schedule. This team, Notre Dame, should be undefeated. Notre Dame should be undefeated going into Florida State. without question in my mind. And then Florida State's at home, so a good chance at that game. SC, a lot depending on can that defense turn it around. They bring in the coordinator from UCLA and Lynn to try and help the defense. But I think this, Jamie, that this schedule is about as favorable as can be. I think it's an easy march into the playoffs, just a matter of where they're ranked. But I think they have a great chance of going undefeated.
I really do too. And you look at how it worked out last year where they had that just brutal stretch of games where it was, they had the tough road games, against Duke, against Louisville, who ended up being much better than people expected them to be. That was bookended by Ohio State on one end and USC on the other. That was just an incredibly tough stretch for any program to go through. And I think that was something that Notre Dame would have done better, probably had a more favorable, probably would have only had one loss in the regular season if they didn't play that hard of a schedule in the middle of it. And I think this one just sets up well where they're not playing teams that, there's obviously some trap games in there. Like, Eric mentioned Georgia Tech. There's going to be some other games. I do think even though Stanford, they're still rebuilding, I think Troy Taylor is a very good football coach, and he's going to get them. He's going to make them at least frisky for Notre Dame. But Notre Dame should still beat the brakes off of them. Notre Dame, what Marcus Freeman has done, like a lot of the coaches who've had success in year 3 at Notre Dame, he's been building up the program, building up the talent. I really, really like the coaching staff. I think they've done a really, really good job in setting them up to be successful this season.
All right, well, Jamie Uyeyama, we really appreciate you stopping by tonight, all your insights, and we'll look for you on Irish Sports Daily as well. And thanks again for participating, Jamie. Thanks
so much for having me.
All right, let's get final comments from Eric Hansen. And Eric, we're going to put you on the spot for your prediction at this point and how things are going to wind up for the Fighting Irish this year. And since we don't play your alma mater for the first time in 2 seasons, which is great, I know you'll be a little more honest with your prediction this year.
Well, I hope I'm generally pretty honest with it. I picked Notre Dame to go 11-1. That's why I have them at 7 instead of higher than that. I think there's going to be a game where things don't go right, but they'll pick themselves up, they'll make the playoff, and they'll host a first-round playoff game. I'm not ruling out 12-0. I just think there's enough question marks about the offensive line. I wasn't willing to go all that way. But one thing I think Notre Dame fans should be excited about is really for the first time in a long time, it feels like the wind's at Marcus Freeman's back, at the back of the head coach. You look at the support he's getting in terms of being able to retain one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, go out and hire one of the best offensive coordinators, having this new facility going up, having an administration that's saying, yeah, we're going to find some middle ground with you in terms of admissions standards or admissions policies for transfers. I like what's going on with Notre Dame football. It feels like they're all on the same side right now.
And academically, they adjusted the academic calendar just a smidge so that the students will be here on campus should that December 20th playoff game occur.
Yeah, I could see them giving them a discount on concessions too, because they want that student section to be there for the playoff game.
A lot of hot chocolate.
A lot of hot chocolate.
Yeah.
Eric Hansen, Inside Notre Dame Sports, Notre Dame Insider, which always sounds very ominous, but thank you for joining us again. We really appreciate your time tonight, Eric.
Thank you.
Well, Michael, final thoughts as we wrap this up tonight on we've talked a lot about the team, the depth, the schedule. Well, final thought.
I think this team is 11-1 at worst. 11-1, and that would be maybe in that opening game to Texas A&M, though I think they'll be fine there, or possibly Florida State. I think it has a great chance of going 12-0. Like Eric said, the contingent on that offensive line, it's inexperienced, but what I think Notre Dame has to counter that is a running quarterback. I think that can definitely take some of the weight off of edge rushers to have the quarterback be able to escape up the middle if there's room. But a running quarterback can negate a detrimental pass rush against you. So I think that works in Notre Dame's favor. I just think they have the depth this year. I know it's the whole third-year thing. I get that, but that being put aside, I just think it's a very, very favorable schedule. I 11-1 at worst, 11-1 at worst, and hosting a playoff game, 12-0 at best.
Excellent. Michael, appreciate you coming by once again. It's been a pleasure working with you. Always enjoy your insights.
Enjoy it.
And a lot of fun when we get together to talk Irish football.
Absolutely.
Let's take a look at a couple of promo items for the Notre Dame senior alumni. We've got a Notre Dame senior alumni golf outing at the Warren Golf Course the Thursday before the Louisville game. Just about sold out from what I understand, but there are still sponsorship opportunities, etc. Everything benefits the God Country Notre Dame Scholarship that is a mission of the Notre Dame senior alumni. And if you're looking to have a chance at playing some golf in Ireland, 3 great golf courses in Ireland: Waterville, Tralee, and Old Head, which is spectacular. $100 a ticket for those raffle tickets. There's available at the Notre Dame Senior Alumni website. So we ask you to hopefully participate in that. Again, it goes toward the God Country Notre Dame Scholarship for the Notre Dame Senior Alumni. And so that wraps it up for our 2024 kickoff preview. We appreciate you watching with us. And so for Eric Hansen, Jamie Uyeyama, Mike Golic, I'm Pat Scanlon. So long, everybody.